But at 20, I thought I was drifting. And at 45, I'm now going, or 52, I'm now like, wow, I've got this whole bank of stuff, memories and places I've seen and people I've met and dangerous things I did that I would never want my kids to do, but are now really helpful when I'm thinking, what would this silly character do? Because I did it. So my name's Roz Nay. I am a thriller writer. I write for Penguin, I'm working on my fifth thriller. I didn't really start writing until about 7 years ago. I'm 50, nearly 53, 53 next week. And yeah, I've managed to get 5 books out with a major publisher, and in terms of my writing bio, I've been nominated for I think 4 national awards, won an international award for thrillers, and I am a bestseller.
And where are you? Where are you in the world now? And
So
where are you from originally?
yeah, I grew up in Eastbourne, and I left the UK about 20 years ago because I met a Canadian when I was backpacking and married him. And we now currently live in Canada in the Rocky Mountains in this tiny little town called Nelson, which is like a really artsy little cool spot, but really difficult to reach. Yeah, and we've been here, we've raised our kids here. So I've been in Nelson for 17 years.
Okay, so we've fully lost you then.
Well, I don't know. Never rule it out. I mean, actually, it's interesting. As I get older, I kind of am edging towards wanting to come back to the UK. Yeah.
Okay, okay. And what was it? So you've told us about how you came to Canada. So what was your kind of trajectory before then? What was your kind of career path? What were you doing before you became a writer?
I was a teacher. I taught high school English. I taught English in the UK for I think about 5 years, and then took off on my own to Australia backpacking. Taught in schools there. I had a work permit, and that's where I met my husband. So I taught high school English for 8 years, and then landed in Canada, and they wouldn't recognise my teaching certificate. So that kind of changed everything. I couldn't teach here without totally retraining, and I already had like close to a decade. And I'd trained at Oxford, but they were like, no. So Canada didn't want any of that. So I had an attitude problem and didn't want to redo it. So I didn't. And because of that, I think it freed me up to take a writing course and start kind of tinkering with ideas of my own rather than teaching other people's.
So would you say that you stumbled into writing? Were you pushed into writing because of the fact that you couldn't teach, or was it something that was kind of dormant, was a passion that was always there?
I think it was always there. When I think about it now, I did a lot of traveling in my 20s, I used to write a journal, like a travel journal. But how I wrote that journal, when I think about it now, was very writerly. I was every day jotting down images of things I'd seen, or metaphors, or snippets of dialogue. So I think I was always thinking and recording like a writer. I just didn't know I was doing it. In a sense, I think writing bloomed for me because my husband signed me up. My husband, Clint, signed me up for a writing course as a hobby because he just wanted me to have something to do that I loved in a new country where I didn't really know very many people, and I had 2 very small kids, and I wasn't back at work yet. So he signed me up and gave that to me as a gift. So in a sense, I did stumble into it, but I think it was always in me, and he knew that. And I loved that writing course. It set me on fire. I couldn't stop writing once I took that. Yeah, it was just that I needed a nudge, though, I would say.
So what was the step from, because I'm sure loads of people do writing courses, but to go from writing courses to then realizing that you could be published, or, could make this a career, like what was that? What was that leap? Was it something that you were pushed into by your course leader? Was it something that you realized yourself? Or?
Yeah, I was encouraged by my course leader. He did take me to one side and tell me, hey, you need to push yourself further, or I am pushing you further than maybe some of the other people in the class. I think he did see something in what I was writing. But I don't know. You know what? I think it was just that I loved it. I loved the course. The course ended. I felt completely bereft without it. And I had written some stuff in the course that stayed with me, and perhaps that is the writer in me, but I couldn't let it go. And so instead of just being like, "Oh, well, the course is done," I went back to that voice and that character and started to think, well, where does she live and what's going on in her world? And if I was to write a longer story, what would happen in it? And so I just started mapping it, I think, quite without a lot of confidence or really any knowledge of what I was doing. I'd never written a novel ever. And at the beginning, I probably thought it was a short story.
Hmm.
And then just little by little by little, I patchworked a plot together and wrote it. I just wrote it. And it was messy, but it had enough about it that I sent it out to agents in Canada, and I got one really quickly. And from there, it was a bit of a whirlwind. It really took off quickly, and I had that kind of dream beginning of a career where everything just kind of landed perfectly. And it got bumpier, but yeah, I think it was just not wanting to let it go and wanting to keep tinkering with something and feeling like I had created a character with a voice who I found really interesting, and she would almost like talk to me in my head. So I talked back, and we just kind of together I created a story around her.
So there's oftentimes, like, we get the impression that everything is that people that kind of make a career of something or turn their passion into a career or a way of earning money. They planned it all. They were kind of completely sure of where they were going to go.
Yeah, and they really they drove towards it, and that isn't what happened to me at all. I feel like I'm not like that as a person, actually. I tend to roll with it.
Same.
And I think, but I do have things that I'm passionate about and love doing. And I have always been kind of in touch with that. I've always written, but like I said before, like in snippets and journals and maybe a little bit scraggy bit of poetry or something that I just would want to record something. But it was always about words and language and writing. But no, I definitely didn't think at 21 I'm going to be a writer. I never announced it. I never thought of it. I just liked words, I think. And then I think I just got more and more and more into it. It was a hobby. It did start as a hobby.
So it was around about 46 when you kind of got into writing. So would you say that for you, that presented itself as the right time? And with the life experiences that you picked up with your backpacking and, moving to another country, did those life experiences, one, add to the stories that, that you tell, and two, add to, the way in which you handle your craft?
I think definitely. I mean, as much as I would have liked to have burst onto the scene at 25 and had like a 40-year career, that's always, you think, oh, if only I could have hit that a bit earlier. But when I really think about it, I think definitely being the age I was, mid-40s, when I hit as a writer, I've used all the life experiences I've had in my thrillers. I've taken exact adventures I went on in my 20s when I thought I didn't know what I was doing, and I really didn't have a plan, and my parents were kind of despairing of me. I have used all of that in the last two thrillers I wrote are exact adventures I went on in my 20s. I've just turned them into kind of a thriller format where everything goes wrong, where obviously it didn't for me. But at 20, I thought I was drifting. And at 45, I'm now going, or 52, I'm now like, wow, I've got this whole bank of stuff, memories and places I've seen and people I've met and dangerous things I did that I would never want my kids to do, but are now really helpful when I'm thinking, what would this silly character do? Because I did it. So, I think also in terms of the industry of writing, I think that if you're going to launch into a creative career, it's tough. You have to have a thick skin. You have to be able to see it as a business, even though you've put your heart and soul creatively into it. And if people are like, no, thank you, we don't want that, or you get kicked to the curb by a publisher, which happens a lot, you can take it a bit better when you're 45 because you know who you are and you know it's not the only thing that you have. Whereas I think if it had hit me at 21, I would have been so obsessed with the fact that I was a writer. And I wouldn't have had my family or, you know, my children, my husband, my everything that I built. I wouldn't have had that then. And I think that it would have felt way more of it already is a roller coaster, but it would have felt way more precarious to me at 21 than it does at 52 because, you know, you take your knocks, you do in this business. And I just feel like I'm more of a solid person at 52 and I can cope with that a bit better.
So is that kind of like the biggest lesson of like handling your craft at your age now? Is it, you know, that you have a thick skin and you can kind of like handle, you know, people, you know, I'm kind of a frustrated creative. So I understand the feeling of, you know, putting an idea out there and, you know, it not being received in the way that you imagine it to be received.
Yeah.
So, you know, at 21, you probably, had you put out, you know, an idea and got the knockbacks, could it have totally derailed your path?
I think so. And I think I would have taken things more to heart because the thing with being a writer now on a bigger stage is that everybody's got access to you. Everyone's got a microphone that they can announce to the world how much they hate your book. And it, you know, Goodreads is, it's not for writers really, or you get tagged in things. Social media is harsh. You get tagged in horrible reviews. There's no need for that, really. People are totally entitled to their opinions, but then you get tagged in them, which I don't really understand. And had that happened at 21, I would have felt bullied because I wouldn't have known enough about myself to take those kind of body punches. Now at 52, I'm thinking, yeah, okay, don't, okay, so you didn't like it, that's all right. It's not really going to derail me. I'll just keep going because there are enough people that obviously do. But I can see that now. I'm just a bit more measured, I think, than I would have been as a younger version of myself.
Do you engage with those criticisms or do you just let them slide?
No, I just let them go. Press on. Yeah, because you have your opinion. I know some writers who are quite outspoken about the fact that they didn't need to be tagged in that. And I agree with that. But I think for the most part, I don't want the conflict. So I'm like, yeah, okay. Thanks very much. On we go. Yeah.
And are there people that kind of you hold dear who you accept their criticism, you accept their or their constructive comments, whereas others you kind of push to one side?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I've got 2 or 3 crime writers who are doing really well, and I show them my work and I know that they know the work and they are really helpful to me and they definitely don't hold back. If I send a first draft, they'll be like, no, this is not working and you are a dum-dum. And this is a dog's breakfast. That's the feedback I'll get. And then that's fine though, because I need that. So yeah, that's part of it. And that's different from the general public just being super mean, or, which they're entitled to do, and that is the world of it. But that's what I've come to learn and at my age, like I'm saying, at my age, it's easier to reconcile that kind of meanness because that can slide off me. And I don't engage, I don't go looking for the 1-star reviews. I know some writers that can't help themselves, but I don't. I just am like, people will like it or people won't, and it's okay.
That reminds me the mention of the crime writer kind of network that you have. So there's two ideas that I've come across in kind of researching this whole kind of blooming late than never project. Is upgrading your network is one way in which you can kind of find your path, and the other one is linked, is kind of changing your environment, and you've changed your environment pretty, like it's a pretty big change of environment, moving from Eastbourne to like Canada.
Mm.
Would you say, had you stayed in the UK, or had you have, rather than gone to Canada, you and Clint and the family, were kind of born and brought up here, you brought up the kids here, could you see yourself being an author, or would you continue being a teacher, or?
It's hard to know. I think I would have continued being a teacher, but I think that it was inevitable. I do have a sense that it was inevitable that I would put more energy into being creative for myself. I think I would have developed it anyway. I don't know how it would have gone, because the UK is a tough. It might have been different had I lived in the UK and tried to get in as a crime writer in the UK. But there's some excellent crime writers in the UK, yeah. So it's quite a tight circle. But I think I would have given it a go. Yeah, I think I like to think that my trajectory would have happened in whatever country, because I think it's just me and the way in which I developed.
Okay. And you're not, is the aim to become a full-time writer? And if so, the work that you're doing at the moment, do you consider it an enabler or an obstacle?
It's interesting. That's an interesting question.
Or a motivation even.
It's interesting. I think definitely I would love to be a full-time writer, and I've dabbled with that. I've had years here and there where I've gone, no, I'm doing it. I'm going to write full-time, and it's been the best year. But then it ends, and I haven't quite got the advances to allow me to keep going endlessly. So the job I'm doing at the moment, it gets in the way in terms of time, because I'm working full-time and it's mentally difficult. It's not an easy job. So I'm a court clerk, which is difficult and stressful, and lots of high pressure moments and lots of responsibility. So in that sense, I don't get enough. I feel I don't get enough writing time, and I don't. But in other ways, it's actually very motivating, because it's an endless conveyor belt, my job, of really interesting stories and really interesting characters. And I just sit quietly in the courtroom and listen and watch. And as a writer, you can't get a better job than that. So it's because the things people say it's so interesting. And I've just pitched an idea based 100% on that job. With the lead character, who is 53, or I think she's 50. So in terms of what this podcast is about, she's a really interesting character, because her whole trajectory is arriving at 50 without really knowing what she's good at, and finding it within the course of these books. Yeah. So she's an embodiment of a late bloomer, I think.
And it's a crime book as well.
It's a crime book, but it's gentler. It's a cozy mystery. I don't know if it'll sell. It may not, but the idea is a gentler kind of Thursday Murder Club, that genre, based around a little quirky courthouse.
The kind of going back to employment, and like how it has the job that you do has inspired some of your thinking and ideas and stories. There's an author called Tim Harford. He does how would I describe him? He's kind of I think he's got an economics background, but he came up with this thing called slow motion multitasking, and it's the idea of having. Effectively, it's like the idea of juggling. Like you've got like lots of things going on. He uses examples of creatives that have, they're a musician, or they play chess, or they do gardening. And the fact that they have all of these things that they're juggling enables them to do all of the things rather than focusing directly on one thing. Like, do you ever think to yourself, oh, if I was to be a full-time writer, that either waste time or wouldn't be as focused, the fact that you only write for an hour a day, it becomes like a discipline, a habit
Mm.
that perhaps, you wouldn't necessarily have if you had all of the time in the world.
Yeah, that's such a good question. I do think that. I think that, and it's funny because I've written this thriller in the year that I've had so little time, and I gave it to my inner circle trusted crime writing friend, and she was like, this is my favorite of the books you've written, and I can barely remember what it is or who's in it or what they've done because it feels very patchworked. But she was like, I think what's happening is you've got an hour, and it's like a concentrated hour, and you're killing it in that hour, and then you go away and do the other stuff. So you might. She's like, this process is working for you, Roz. So it's funny because I feel panicky that I don't have enough time, but I am using my time. Yeah. And I think you're right with an expanse. It feels spacious, but actually, if you looked at the minute to minute of what's getting done, it
Mm.
might not be massively different in terms of all the extra kind of time wasting. Like I just check my emails, and I've got a little bit of research I need to do, and let me just research this, boats and the layout of luxury cruises, which I probably don't need to spend 2 hours on. But yeah, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. But if you have a confined amount of time, I think maybe you do get more done. It's funny as well because my son just graduated, and his teacher said to me, the mistake you made, Roz, was giving him two spares in his last year, because as soon as he took his foot off the pedal, he'd got very little done for an entire
Okay.
year. So she was like, yeah, don't do that in grade 12. Keep them moving at a far, a kind of, if you keep a certain amount of pressure, I think there's a kind of sweet spot where pressure's not too much, but you've got to keep moving. Um, so for me, it's about that, trying to find that sweet spot where I am, because I am under pressure to get a lot of stuff done. I'm mentoring this year. I'm working for a university writing program. I'm trying to finish a thriller. I'm pitching a new one, and I'm working full time. So yeah, it's a lot, but I'm just trying to stay kind of healthy within that, and then I might just get everything done, which would be good.
Yeah, because there's always that negative of, being too busy isn't a
Mm,
good thing. But
mm,
then, if you're kind of trying to find little pockets of time to do your passion, that may actually be a healthier approach. And I sometimes wonder about, lots of people say that they've got like they've got a book in them, but they just need the time
mm.
to just sit down and write it. Whereas maybe not having all the time in the world is a good thing, especially as, like people in their 40s and 50s, we have responsibilities. So,
Yeah,
maybe it is a good time to just dive in and just
yeah. I
claim
think just
those
set
those minutes.
yourself a definite make. Say to yourself, I have got. You'd have to get up early, which is what I do. But yeah, you will be at your desk writing at 6 a.m. every
Mm.
morning. Every morning. As a, like you would, go for a walk, or you would make a coffee. You write for an hour, and it is quite amazing what you can get done if you write every
Mm.
day for an hour and you don't miss it. Yeah,
And
it's yeah.
is that hour, is it always kind of like linear in terms of you're writing for an hour every day on the one project, or is it that you're writing an hour every day and it could be differing projects?
I think, like when I was just in England this summer, I was asked to write a synopsis with a new idea, and that took me the entire, because I thought when I was in England, an hour a day, I'd probably finish my thriller. But I knew I tend to prioritize by what are people waiting on from me, like what's the most urgent. And I knew that my agent was asking for this full synopsis, and it was going to take me a couple of weeks to write a good one. So I switched project on the plane over, and I was like, okay, in England I'm going to work on this, and I started thinking about a totally different project. So that was a project that took the entire trip that I was in the UK. Then I've come back, and now I'm back in thriller mode. So I do jump, but I can't within the hour. I can't, or in the week, I can't jump project. I need to give myself a little space between. And sometimes I'll spend an hour in the morning. Like yesterday morning, I got up and worked for an hour on one paragraph. And I felt frustrated. Like I was like, because I wanted forward motion. But that is forward motion. And I need to remind myself that sometimes you've got to get the sentence right. And it might take you an hour. I still haven't got it. I'll have to go back in again today to that paragraph. But in the meantime, while I was at work and driving to work, and I think I figured out what the sentence needs to be. But it's always running. It's constantly running running in my head.
It incubates, right? So it's
Totally,
that thing of like,
yeah,
doing something different. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
What would you say were the obstacles for you getting into writing when you did?
Well, in terms of like my personal obstacles were that I think my kids were like, when I started writing, it wasn't 27. I got published in 2017. I think I landed the contract in 2016. And I think there were about 4 years before that where I was just tinkering or taking classes or loving it, or, I think there was about a 4 year span where I wasn't writing. I wasn't a working writer. And in those years, the difficulties I found, there was like personal ones, which were that my children were very young. So my daughter would only have been, I feel like she was really young, like 3 or something. Can that be right? I think I started in about 2011 or 12 taking classes. So she was 3 or 4. So I was looking after a little toddler, two little toddlers, because my son's only about a year and a half older than her. So in personal terms, I was full-time parenting, and I could only write when they napped. So I was doing that, and I remember my writing table just being cluttered with. And I'm really minimalist. I don't like clutter at all when I write. It has to be like a clean table, clean wall in front of me. And I remember that table because it was like glitter everywhere and scraps of paper. And it was always just a bit like, okay, but I'm going to do it anyway. Because if I take the nap time to clean the table, I'll never get anything done. So, and I do think also it is a bit of an obstacle living in a tiny, tiny little mountain town. When you're trying to put work out that you want, or that is going to be on a bigger stage, like a national, international, in that kind of arena, it is difficult to be living out in the middle of nowhere because it's hard for me to travel to events. It's hard for publishers to promote me. It's rare that I get to meet my team, and rural writers are kind of underfunded and undernoticed. I do think that. So I would say that being rural is a bit of you have to push a bit harder to get to the front, I think.
Of the novels that you've written, actually, could you tell us the names of the novels?
Yeah, I've got them here. Look, if I hold them up, are they back to front? Back to front?
No, that's good. Yeah.
Okay. Novel 1, Our Little Secret. So this one came directly out of that writing class where I had 1,000-word homework where I had to write in the voice of someone with an axe to grind. So just somebody who's ranting and they're really upset about something. So I created the main voice, and this whole book is in her voice. It's all first person. And I just move the reader from present police interview room to 10 years earlier, this girl at high school and the story she really wants to tell. But it's basically about a woman who's gone missing, and the police think that the narrator knows something. So it's just a thriller in terms of does she or doesn't she, or is she a pawn in somebody else's game, or what's going on really. So that one came out in 2017.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want me to just talk you through all of them?
Go.
Okay, and then next, book 2, my tricky second album. Book 2, Hurry Home. This took me ages to write. And this is where I nearly quit writing altogether because I couldn't get it. And the story that I wanted to write and that I submitted to my publisher wasn't really a thriller. It wasn't thriller format. I didn't know yet that thrillers are quite formulaic. You've got a structure, and if you don't understand the structure, you're going to drift all over the place. And that's not commercial and it's not thriller and you're not hitting the right beats at the right time. And I had to do this. I broke contract twice on this book and nearly didn't manage it. And it took me, I think, 2 years to write this when it should have taken me, well, I think my contract was 1 year and I definitely sailed past the second year mark on this one. But it came out, I can't remember when, 2019, I think. I can't really remember. Yeah, and in the end, I got there in the end. But before I finished writing this one, because I had lost all my love of writing, because I just felt like I was failing all the time and not getting it right. And my editors were tearing their hair out and it was just like not fun. So I started a new book, just to remind myself of why I wrote in the first place and what I loved about it and what story did I want to tell. And I started The Hunted while I hadn't finished. Okay. I hadn't finished this one yet. I was still in edits, struggling. And then I just started this one just to free flow again and have that feeling. And in between book 2 and book 3, I took some courses on story and structure and narrative. Like what is a 300 book story? What does it look like? What is a 3-act play? I didn't understand any of that. And so I took a bunch of courses, read a bunch of books. And this book I wrote in 9 months and I plotted it. So that was really different. So The Hunted came out, I think, 2021 and was very enjoyable and lovely to write. And it needed like minimal edits. And it was like a game changer. So my whole creative process changed between book 2 and book 3. And this one, I realized that I can't just wing it. I have to plot and I have to know what I'm doing. So I only figured that out in book 3. And that one came out in 2021, right in the middle of the pandemic, I think. And then, and that was my 3-book deal with Simon & Schuster, which is a big publisher here. That ended that. And then I wrote The Offing and got offers on it from different publishers as well, and actually switched and went to Penguin for this one. And again, it was plotted. This is the most kind of ambitious of the books that I've written. It's more complex. There are more timelines all happening at once. It's harsher in terms of the crime, I think. And the twist seems to be getting everybody. Like I'm getting a lot of messages about this one. This just came out this year in May. So yeah, new publisher, new editor. But I would say of the 4 and the 5th, I'm contracted for the 5th, which is the one I'm currently trying to finish. But of the 4 ones that are currently published, I would say the happiest of them were the 3rd and the 4th to write.
The 3rd and 4th, okay. That was going to be my question. Which is your favourite? And the 3rd and the 4th, do you feel they're the happiest because you spent time plotting them?
Yes.
Yeah.
I do actually, because I figured out, I think I've always been creative. I've always been able to write scenes and create characters. But what I didn't understand was the other piece that I think that has to go alongside writing a book, which is an understanding of structure and the scaffolding and all the kind of slightly less exciting pieces, which are so important when you're submitting a manuscript. It has to be organized because publishers will sniff it out in 10 minutes. Whether you know what you're doing structure-wise. So that once I had that piece a bit more organised could put the two together, the books came out a lot faster and were way smoother to write because it's miserable when you're writing scenes and scenes and scenes and scenes and you don't need them and you don't realise you don't need them, but you're writing yourself down a rabbit hole. I've done that a lot. My agent used to say I write a practice book first, which is an exhausting process. I don't think I do that anymore, but that was what I was like early. I used to write the entire book and probably cut half of it in edits.
Is there a time that you give to plotting or like a length of time you give or?
I mean, it's been different. With The Hunted, I plotted it meticulously. That's the 3rd book where it had been miserable for the 2nd book. And then I just started this one. This one I had all over the wall behind me in Post-it notes, color coded.
Nice.
The first half of the books, I knew I had 4 main characters. I knew exactly what each one of them was doing. all the way from the beginning to the midpoint of the novel. So I had the first 150 pages pretty much mapped. And from that, I could create chapters because I knew who was doing what. Even if you didn't see them on the page, I knew what they were up to. So that was pretty meticulous planning. And then I didn't do that with the offing. I didn't have any post-it notes on the wall, but I did have a beat sheet, which I knew what stage of the story I was in, and I knew I was hitting it at roughly the right page number, like down to that much planning. But within that, it was kind of a bit more fluid. And I did, in a sense, kind of feel my way through this one, but I did stick to a beat sheet where, as a kind of overarching map, I knew what needed to happen and when. And I knew already the whole story. I always know the story before I write the story now. Whereas with the second one, I was just kind of, the characters were telling me what was happening, and it didn't work out that well. Yeah.
Knowing what you know now, like, how would you approach kind of being a writer differently, particularly in terms of, maybe getting a contract with a publisher?
How would I approach that? I feel like he did it pretty well. Like, even maybe because I was 46 when I was trying to hook a. I knew I wanted a major publisher, if possible, because I'm not very good at social media or self-promotion. I mean, I like to write books, but I don't love to self-promote. And so I wanted a major publisher because they've got that whole engine behind them where they do all the marketing, the sales, and you don't have to like try and encourage people, but they'll do it for you. They'll do the encouraging to buy your book for you. So I did my homework pretty well. Like, Canada's small, and I knew exactly which agent I wanted, and I researched them, and I only submitted to, I think, 2 agents. And I feel like that was I tell people to do that all the time, because I think the more exclusive you can be, the more researched you appear. You look,
Yeah.
you don't want to appear like you're trawling, desperate, even if you are. So I wouldn't change that. I think the only thing I would change in the whole process is being a little bit more circumspect at the beginning, because I have had to learn the thick skin, and it's okay to get dumped by a publisher, because that's happened to me, and it happens to a lot. I would say most of the writers I know get kicked to the curb at some point, and you have to just get up and dust yourself down and keep going. And that's the difference. Do you have the grit to just keep going? And it's okay, and it's part of the industry. I didn't know that at the beginning, and so I was really upset when I got dumped. And I think now I would tell myself at the beginning, hey, that's probably going to happen. And what you're going to do is, lick your wounds for a week, and then you're going to get back up, and something else will come. And usually it does. And everyone I know, most of the crime writers I know are in their 50s, interestingly. And I think there's a whole new wave of writers who are making it big on TikTok and social media and selling books that way. I have no knowledge of how to do that, none. And in fact, wanted to write a book about that, because I think it's really interesting, like the TikTok writing generation and the old, 50-year-old women. I think there's a funny comparison to be made there. But yeah,
what, a crime book, or
no? It would be a fun, or I think it would be a cozy, because it's so comical to me.
Okay.
I think it would need to not be. We could write a thriller, but I think it's not creepy enough. I think it's too funny.
Okay.
But yeah, that, I think, to be honest, there isn't an awful lot I'd do differently.
All right. Is there anything that you want to add? Anything that you want to say to people that are considering pursuing this, or anything that you, maybe a message to your future self?
Yeah, I would say to those people, thinking, oh, I'm 45, I'm interested in writing a book. I think that's prime time as a writer. I really do. I think that, apart from what I don't understand about TikTok and BookTok and all of that, I'm not of that generation, but I think that it's perfect timing, because you have all the life experience now. You have that wealth and that bank of memories, and probably there is something in there that you could turn into a book. Whereas at 21, it's all coming at you and it's just all adventure. And I feel like I was storing through my 20s to use in my 40s. And so it's not, you're not late to the game. I think if you're mid 40s, I feel like everybody I know who's got into crime writing, but kind of landed a book around there. So yeah, yeah. So I definitely don't think it's too late.
And what's the future look like? What's the aim? Do you want to do stuff for, I don't know, TV, theatre? Do you want to branch out into other kind of
I mean, I've
avenues?
got an agent who's really amazingly good and he's in New York and he's very connected with film and TV. So, I mean, that would be a dream to have a project that he could sell or, option or I think getting something into production is such a lottery. It really is, but it's great to just even be in the room. Um, but that is a dream. I think my dream would just to have a little bit more space. I mean, we've talked about the work creative balance. I feel like if I could have a couple of days a week where I write and work the rest of it, I think I would be really productive. And I think it would create a balance. So I'm not just sitting on my own all the time because writing's quite isolated. I think it's good to get out in the world a bit as well and keep gathering material. But yeah, I think my ultimate goal, dream goal, would be write a couple of days a week and work for the rest of it, and just have a bit more balance would be nice. And obviously a TV deal with Netflix.
Yes. That's always nice.
Yeah.
Well, you never know. There could be someone from Netflix watching this.
Maybe.
Oh, well, this has been awesome. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.